Ole Miss is working to land the top player in the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're diving into Ole Miss's pursuit of Eric Singleton, the on-3 top transfer target right now. The wide receiver out of Georgia Tech is a dynamic playmaker who managed to shine despite the Yellow Jackets' struggle in the passing games of the season. Early reports have Georgia, Auburn, and Ole Miss as the front runners for his commitment, but this race could be even closer than it seems. We'll tell you all about that. So stay tuned for all the details and what it means for the Rebels going forward. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special thank you and hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Zach Blackerby at Locked On Auburn. They offer great perspectives on college football, the SEC, and yes, even Ole Miss. So check them out. You can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we're just hanging out, doing whatever. And, I saw that Eric Singleton hit the transfer portal market like most everybody did potentially. And Singleton is from Douglasville, Georgia. He was originally committed to the Auburn Tigers. So there's a lot of issues at play in this transfer portal when people start to try and connect the dots, exactly how he could end up at Ole Miss, or if he goes to Auburn, or if he goes to, say, Georgia. That is what's going on. Singleton this season, in his offense that has struggled throwing the football at times, had 56 catches, 754 yards, and 3 touchdowns. A good player. And whenever you look at On3, they listed Ole Miss, Georgia, and Auburn as the favorites for his services. A little bit later on in the day, they actually took Georgia off of this list, and it was between Ole Miss and Auburn. So that is very interesting of what's going on with Eric Singleton. Jeff Ketchum, the publisher of orangebloods.com, I think it's the Rivals site, that may be On3, I don't know, but that site said that the rumors he was hearing is $2 million for the services of Eric Singleton. This is going to be a weird year. Lane Kiffin talked about in the signing day press conference of how prices have been inflated for the transfer portal for this year and beyond. So what Ole Miss did a year ago, it's going to be more difficult to do because of the players that are in the portal. Their players' hands are expecting a little bit more, and the market value honestly has not yet been set. But Eric Singleton is a terrific, terrific football player. And we talked yesterday about Joseph Williams and how Ole Miss is looking to replace that Trey Harris, and get that dominant style wide receiver in their offense. They need it. They crave it, honestly. But Ole Miss could absolutely get that with an Eric Singleton. Singleton was a freshman, I believe, when the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets came to Oxford. They looked pretty well. I like the way their offense ran. Ole Miss pulled away in the fourth quarter in that game. But it's a situation with him and Jamal Haynes. You saw a young nucleus of players that Brent Key was able to put together with the team, and Buster Faulkner absolutely was in his bag. His use of Eric Singleton was really, really good. Singleton is obviously thinking about the next level and thinking about what he can do. And if you look at the 3 contenders, I should say, on his profile as soon as he goes in the transfer portal, you have Georgia. Let's just be honest. Georgia's recruiting every decent wide receiver that's out there right now because they don't have any. This is the most weird thing ever that the Georgia Bulldogs, was starting a wide receiver in the SEC championship game that was described by the announcers as not a natural catcher of the ball. That absolutely blew my mind. So Georgia is looking at every wide receiver that goes in the portal, and they've got the money to go. They're probably going to blow up the market value on somebody to make sure they get him, whether it's Jonte Cook or whoever it might be. just know that the Georgia Bulldogs are going to be real players. But as we told you with Eric Singleton, Georgia came off of his list, which left two teams, and that was the Auburn Tigers and the Ole Miss Rebels. Let's start with the Auburn Tigers. Eric Singleton was committed to the Auburn Tigers in 22 before flipping to Georgia Tech. So the relationship is potentially there. That timeline means that it would have been the Brian Harsin staff potentially more so that recruited Eric Singleton than the Hugh Freeze staff. So the relationship might not be there other than some ops guys or things like that. Eric Singleton, obviously, after I guess Harsin got left go and he tried to find other things to do with what Auburn did to Brian Harsin, that's how he ended up at Georgia Tech. And we always talk about how in high school recruiting, the most important thing, even more than landing the player, even though that more people would prefer to land him than not, is to get into that final two. So when that player transfers, you're at the top of the speed dial. The speed dial would let you know that Auburn at least was there, or at least the Brian Harsin version of Auburn was there. So that doesn't need to be discounted. And Auburn right now is going all in on the portal because the reality of what's going on is if Hugh Freeze throws up another 6-win season, he's not going to make it. It will be the end of the Auburn experiment and they'll move on to the next coach. This year is imperative. Auburn needs a quarterback. Auburn needs playmakers at the wide receiver position to become what Auburn fans think it should be and what they haven't been this decade. So that is the truth of what's going on with the Auburn Tigers. And Eric Singleton, who was committed to the Tigers, flipped to Georgia Tech. Now the question becomes, does he go back to Auburn? And this staff that is actually completely different than the one that he decommitted from because it was all that weird stuff at the end of 2022. Now, Ole Miss, we talked yesterday about how Ole Miss needed a frontline number one wide receiver, and Eric Singleton would fit that bill in a way that's honestly a little bit different than a Trey Harris. You can build up that wide receiver room by doing this simply. Caleb Cunningham has all the potential in the world to be a Trey Harris type wide receiver for Ole Miss, but it is potential. You're counting on a top 25 high school player to be the elite pass catcher, but he is going to develop into that over time. You have Caden Lee, who this season, Ole Miss put out a graphic. Caden Lee did not drop a single pass this season. And that is imperative with a quarterback in Austin Simmons, potentially in 2025, that throws a pretty hard ball. So that other wide receiver position becomes interesting. Do you go with the big type wide receivers like a Trey Harris, like a Joseph Williams, like that? Or do you get a smaller wide receiver that is a dynamic playmaker like Eric Singleton and match him up with Caleb Cunningham on the outside and using tight ends in the formation as well? Because there's a lot of stuff going on. And we're going to talk in the next segment about how Caleb Odom and Jaheim Otis, they're visiting Colorado. And a lot of that might have to do with values creeping up and what's going down, but visits doesn't necessarily mean the inroad. But we are going to talk about that a little bit in the next segment. But Eric Singleton matching up with all these playmakers when you're trying to Frankenstein's monster and offense together like you do every single year, it would fit and it would be a fairly easy fit. And if you look at the top transfer players that are available, there's a lot of wide receivers right now. And Ole Miss is in on almost every single one of them. So it's not a death knell. It's not a position to where if you do not get this player, it's, oh, woe is me. But the fact that you're in this conversation is interesting. And like I said, the NIL packages have gone through the roof with the rumored revenue sharing coming in July. There's going to be schools operating as if that is just, hey, we're going to go ahead and make our deals right now and handle the gap before July for people that are coming into school at the beginning of the new year. And you have other schools that are going to wait. So there's this little gray area right now. And I'm going to tell you something before everybody freaks out about what's going on. Whatever would be the most advantageous situation for Ole Miss winning football games is what Lane Kiffin and that personnel department is going to do. And they're going to do that before everybody else. So we'll see exactly what's going on and how they handle it. But Eric Singleton has a chance to be a big-time playmaker. And if he pays attention to the Lane Kiffin offense, Ole Miss uses its wide receivers. Ole Miss uses its stars. It's not a situation where he's going to come in and catch 15 balls. It's a situation where if he is the true number one, Ole Miss is going to game plan for that true number one with the running game they have and stuff like that. Next, we dive into some key recruiting visits that have been lined up and crystal ball picks as well from David Johnson of Inside the Rebels. With some Arkansas heavy names catching attention, what does it mean for the Hogs and the Ole Miss Rebels? Plus, we'll look at Nebraska transfer Prince Will Amon-Mielen, who is visiting the Ole Miss Rebels. And then you have Jaheim Otis and Caleb Odom checking out Colorado this week. Stay tuned. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Every college football playoff game right now is featuring a home team that is favored by a touchdown or more. And I might be crazy, but Tennessee might be better fits for cold weather than Ohio State with the way they run the football and play defense. That game might be the upset. That is my hunch. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest articles, latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place those bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place those live bets in one place. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. It's an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So looking around visits and what Ole Miss has going on currently, it's interesting. And the first thing that's really weird for me is the relationship that is going on right now with the Arkansas Razorbacks. There's been crystal balls put in for offensive linemen. There's cornerbacks that are visiting this weekend. Now, it doesn't mean that Ole Miss is going to get them all, but Ole Miss is getting visits from most of them. And it might be Chris Pupal and that family and the respect that he had in the Arkansas locker room. And it may just be purely coincidental because Sam Pittman, they view this as being his swan song, his last year of what's going on. And Arkansas is losing a ton of players right now in the portal. We're going to start out with a crystal ball that David Johnson put in from 24/7 Sports. Patrick Kutas is in the portal from the Arkansas Razorbacks. He is a guard, by the way. If you want to talk about the position, he's an interior offensive lineman. He started the last 2 years for the Arkansas Razorbacks. He's a pretty good football player, but he has been crystal balled to Ole Miss by David Johnson. He's not the only one from Arkansas. A visitor this weekend will be Jalen Braxton, a cornerback that played for the Hogs this week. He's going to come in, and we looked on Twitter. I think there's a note from Chris Paul's dad about Jalen Braxton, what type of player he is. At cornerback, he's at least interesting. And if you want to know, he got retweeted by Lane Kiffin earlier on this thing. So this might be a bigger deal than we even know about with Jalen Braxton being available. And then on the offensive side of the ball, and this is something you should pay attention to, honestly, I liked Luke Haas. Luke Haas is visiting this week as well. He is a tight end and a likely replacement for Caden Priestcorn. Also, Austin Simmons retweeted the tight end from Northwest Missouri State for an underclassman that's moving up. The transfer portal right now is packed. It just is. I'd have no idea what's going on. It's almost as if the players are giving up on Sam Pittman a little bit. The Arkansas fan base is really upset. They're making jokes about how we are becoming Ole Miss's farm team, and they don't know how to mentally handle exactly how that goes. And, it is what it is, but those Arkansas players, there's even more they can get in the portal. There's visits that can happen. There's a lot of Arkansas players that are looking at Ole Miss right now. Like I said, Lane Kiffin liked it and then deleted the tweet. He retweeted that Arkansas is becoming Ole Miss's farm team. So that's interesting. That made me laugh a little bit, but it got deleted really, really quickly as well. Turning the page a little bit, Ole Miss is expecting a visit, I think today, or at least sometime this week, from Prince Will Amon-Mielen. And I am so glad from Princely that I learned how to say Amon-Mielen. Amon-Mielen played in defensive end and linebacker at Nebraska. He is somebody that's twitchy. He is not Princely, okay? I don't think he is there as far as the upside and the gifts and all that. But for what Ole Miss needs him to be, he's almost perfect for it. And Prince will contribute greatly, and you would be glad to have that family associated with your name, just like Princely. Because at the end of the day, Princely did everything that Ole Miss, as a fan base and as a coaching staff, asked him to do. I'm sure that Prince will do the same thing if he decides to commit to Ole Miss, but he is taking an official visit this week at Ole Miss. Now, that's the good news, and there's going to be more that pops up continually through this week. But the bad news, if there are any bad news, is Jaheim Otis and Caleb Odom are going to take visits to Colorado. Caleb Odom's a wide receiver out of Carrollton, Georgia. His quarterback there was Julian Lewis, I believe, who was the quarterback that signed with Colorado. He was a year behind Caleb Odom. So there is the relationship. That is why Caleb Odom would be interested in this. Deion Sanders is really good at closing people out on these visits. Deion Sanders does an excellent job of that. And he can probably get some discounts that other people will not get because of who he is. Let's just be real about that. Like Jaheim Otis, the rumblings that even before this visit got announced is that his price tag might be up at the top end and maybe even a little bit too high. And Ole Miss is trying to determine if they can find somebody that's a little bit less expensive but feel the need of what Walter Nolan did, or if they're going to have to break the bank a little bit for Jaheim Otis. That is an interesting question for Walker Jones, for Lane Kiffin, for the personnel department, the capologist at Ole Miss. Caleb Odom, though, his quarterback in high school was playing quarterback at Colorado. Now, Colorado is going to bring in a transfer guy. Caleb Odom is probably not going to play more than a year with him, but just for what it is, he is taking that visit. The question will be, does Ole Miss get Caleb Odom on campus for a visit? I think that's the question that needs to be asked. Everybody assumed of what was going on and everything, but Colorado has done a good job kind of jumping to the front of the line right now to get in the first view. If Caleb Odom gets to Ole Miss without committing, Ole Miss is probably in very good shape because Caleb Odom loves Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss offense and pretty much everything about it. Jaheim Otis, Mississippi kid, same situation. If either one of them get out of Colorado without committing and visit Ole Miss, the chance is that Ole Miss is likely going to get them. If they commit to Colorado, obviously it's kind of over at that point because of what we just said. Like I said, the questions with Jaheim Otis will be the price tag. The questions with Caleb Odom will be the fact that his quarterback is now at Colorado. Again, Odom loves Lane Kiffin. Jaheim Otis loves Randall Joyner, Pete Golding, and the state of Mississippi. So Ole Miss is by no means out of this, but it is something to pay attention to as well. A whole bunch more portal news is going to break over the next few days. They think the portal is open until December 28th of new players going into the portal. And then all the way through January will be people coming out of the portal into their new homes. Ole Miss's school starts probably around the 21st of January. The drop ad date's right around February 1st. So this is going to go on essentially for the next 2 months in one way or another. Ole Miss is about to start bowl practice. They're trying to set it up to where people are visiting when Ole Miss is practicing for bowls. That's the reason that some of these guys might be pushed to the end of the week, the beginning of next week. That is why Ole Miss obviously has brought people in early. So we'll be able to see exactly how it goes. Hey, we're going to talk after this is over. The Gator Bowl narrative has completely changed. Everything that we thought was the story 4 days ago is not the story now. So we'll talk about that in just a second as well. And I would want to let you know in our final segment, we're going to dive into potential Gator Bowl opt-out by Duke quarterback Malik Murphy and how it can impact Ole Miss, with Trey Washington and Trey Amos sparking a wave of opt-ins, including Jackson Dart. What does that mean for the matchup? Stay tuned. You know, nothing delivers comfort and joy like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha steaks. It is guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts in Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That is 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchases apply. So the narrative surrounding the Gator Bowl has completely changed since Sunday. Against Sunday and all during Sunday, it was like, okay, how many Ole Miss players are going to play? Are they going to face a fired up Duke team that just won 9 games? You have a defense lining up on both sides to where Ole Miss leads the nation in tackles for loss, and Duke is second in the nation in tackles for loss. It kind of lets you know what is going on in Jacksonville in the Gator Bowl. Whenever you look at what has happened since then, it kind of boggles the mind just a little bit. Ole Miss has had a string of opt-ins that started with Trey Washington midway through Tuesday and ended up with Pupal late Tuesday evening. Jackson Dart opted in. Jordan Watkins opted in. A lot of players opted into this game that Ole Miss honestly needed if they were going to be in any semblance of full strength. Now, will opt-outs by Ole Miss happen for the game? The rumor is probably yes. There's probably still some things. I think it was Chuck Rounsaville or something at the Ole Miss Spirit that said that, you know, Walter Nolan is a candidate for it. Jared Ivey is a candidate for it. And also Micah Pettis is a candidate for it. Will it happen? I do not know. As of this point, whenever it was asked of Lane Kiffin, he said that nobody informed him of the decision not to play the game. So all we can do is take them at their word, no matter what. We've heard different stuff. All we can do is take it as the word. The one opt-out that is actually consequential in this game is Malik Murphy. Again, Duke won 9 games this year, and their defense was attack-worthy, I guess we can say. Offensively, if they're not, and Star Thomas, who Ole Miss committed a good portion during the last transfer portal season, is on the field, it could be interesting for this defense. Ole Miss having a defensive line of, let's say, Jared Ivey and Princely Amamiel and Walter Nolan. If they're out, that means that Suntaran Perkins, Xavion Harris, and Kim Franklin can get some work. Maybe some young guys that didn't play very much at linebacker, potentially Pupal and TJ Daughtery. So no real change from the season, and Trey Amos coming back at that boundary corner position is absolutely massive. Trey Washington, again, one of the best soldiers that Ole Miss football has had in the last 20 years. The defense has a chance to be pretty good in this game. So it starts when you're wondering about what's going on and opt-outs and all of that stuff. Is Ole Miss about to walk into this Gator Bowl a version of the 2014 TCU team or the 1990 Michigan team that Ole Miss faced? Is Duke walking into a buzzsaw? That is the question, especially if Duke does not have their starting quarterback. The guy that is playing quarterback for them 1 pass completion for 7 yards. That is the statistic this season. Now, Duke is going to play very hard, and they're going to get ready to go. And I do not necessarily understand why Malik Murphy even got into the portal. You're at one of the better schools in the entire country to where the name on the piece of paper actually is going to mean something in, I don't know, a couple of years. And B, you're winning games and going to bowl games and stuff like that while putting yourself out there to make money in the NFL. I mean, it's the make money now thing that people go through. Maybe he ends up at Vandy. I don't know. Maybe he's just going through all of these smart person schools and stuff like that. But we will see exactly how it looks for the Duke Blue Devils. Again, this game narrative has completely changed. This is looking more and more like a pissed off Ole Miss team facing Duke. The line has jumped up from 11.5 to 13.5. I'm assuming on the news that Malik Murphy is not playing in the game. That happening is a pretty big deal. Again, it could be fine. I do think in this game, with 2025 being the most important part of this game, because that hasn't changed. Even if Jackson Dart and Jordan Watkins and all of those guys are going to play football, 2025 still has to play a role in this game, and that includes getting Logan Diggs carries in this game. If for some reason Ulysses Bentley opts out, which would be honestly hilarious if we're going to be real about it, but if that happens, Logan Diggs needs the starting carries, and they need to see exactly what he has. He has been recovering for about a year at this point. He tore his knee up on January 1st, so it'll be 1 year since the injury when Ole Miss plays on January 2nd. And since the surgery, it probably happened sometime around January 7th, something like that. So it's about a year out. There's been players that have come back faster than that. There's been players that's come back slower than that. But I would like to know personally as an Ole Miss fan if Ole Miss needs to go into the transfer portal to find that extra running back so that they don't panic and another situation like last season doesn't happen. Because now looking back with the benefit of hindsight, Ole Miss panicked a little bit after Quinshawn left. And that's the reason they brought all of those running backs in, because they weren't expecting to have to do it. So their evaluations may not have been there. Maybe they learned their lesson on that. I do not know, but we will see exactly how it goes. All right. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen and your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. Heck, you made us Ole Miss's morning show, and we appreciate that. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Howdy toddy, everyone.